Joris Beerda is a co-founder with Yu-Kai Chou and the managing director of the Octalysis Group. Their goal is to transform the world through gameful and behavioral design. They have customers almost everywhere in the world, from startups to Fortune 500 companies such as Tesla, eBay, and the Volkswagen Group. They focus on gamification in business to increase ROIs using their framework. The Octalysis framework is a human-centric gamification design that lays out the 8 core drives for human motivation, and their framework has already been translated into 16 different languages. So, first of all, thank you for accepting my invitation for the interview. I will ask questions about gamification in general and as well about the Octalysis Group. So my first question is, do you remember how you discovered the gamification concept?
Well, probably around 8 or 9 years ago was the first time I heard of it. It was through, at the time these gamification courses started to appear online, and I realized that what I've been doing in my work, what I've been doing over, was already a kind of gamification, but I didn't have the word for it. And so when I started to get more into it, say, hey, this is really interesting, but I thought it didn't have a clear framework. It didn't have something that gave it a place. It was just gimmicks, and it didn't feel very valuable. And then I met Yu-Kai's work, and started to get a lot more interested in it. But I thought it could benefit from 2 people working on it, making sure there's a deliverable model that actually works. And so now we have the Octalysis framework with the whole 5-step Octalysis implementation process. And yeah, so that's where my gamification discovery led to where we are now.
Maybe it's a bit linked with the previous question. How did you get the idea to create the Octalysis Group with Yu-Kai Chou?
Okay. It's kind of linked, but so when we met, we liked each other. And obviously in terms of gamification he was already much more advanced than I was, but I had a very solid consulting background. And so we said, hey, why don't we combine the two? He already knew a lot about consulting himself, obviously. And so I thought, like, if we have a consulting group that can make sure that the Octalysis framework becomes valuable for all kinds of clients around the world, then we're actually achieving our objectives better, right? Because our objectives were, and still are, Octalysis is a force for good in the world. And so we felt if we do it in a consulting group, we can actually give it to more people than just, one-man bands.
The Octalysis Group is almost everywhere in the world, as you said. Do you always operate the same way, or do you adapt depending on, for instance, the culture of the country?
Okay. Yeah, so we know that every human being has certain intrinsic motivators that are valid for everybody. So we all have the needs and the want to socialize. We all have the want and the need to be creative and have some autonomy. Even in countries where you think it's not relevant or not as visible, it's still there. And especially in individual experiences. So for example, you see people in Japan who are characterized as group animals. Once you give them a lot of autonomy and autonomous choices, they are still able to, as an individual, employ these innate drivers that they have themselves. The same accounts for creativity, and the same accounts for unpredictability that we all like. We all are curious already by birth. And so we realize that in certain cultures, but also in certain user groups, of course, these are differences. So it's not just about countries and cultures. Within France, there are people who are very risk averse, and there are people who are very risk takers. Men, women, for example, or millennials and older people is a very good example. So we always need to make sure that we adjust the design for our dominant player types, which you call them. And we come to these player types by making analysis of demography and psychographics. So what are the lifestyles of people, as well as the core of motivation. How does an accountant differ from a musician?
This one is a long one. So I've recently watched on YouTube an interview of Sabrina, who works for the Octalysis Group, and she says something very similar to what you said. She explained that your goal is to use gamification to make the world better, and so you would, for instance, not work for a tobacco company or create something which could cause really addiction in the bad way. I really believe that gamification can help to make the world better. It's why I promote the concept on my YouTube channel, but like a superpower, it could be used in the dark side. For instance, in China, they start to read this old citizens, remembering the dystopia 1984 with Big Brother, which inspired an episode of Netflix, the series Black Mirror. That's the introduction, the question. I know it's a hard question, but how to know the limits? Some situations are really black and white, but when it's great to have some rules to be sure to not create something which could be one day inspired for an episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah. Okay. I think actually it's a very simple question, where people make a lot about it. It all depends on your what you want to achieve, right? What's your end goal? If your end goal is to make people more addicted to alcohol, drugs, or other things that are bad for people, obviously bad, then obviously that is a bad idea. If it is to get people more healthy, or making them care about families more, or making sure that they're more engaged ecologically, that is of course something good. And so some things are maybe more gray zone. Is it good to make people more loyal to a brand? You could say for some people yes, and for some people no. But we've always had this same question, right? When evil people like Goebbels in Nazi Germany use the power of speech, does it mean you have to condemn speech? Or because when Mahatma Gandhi was using it, we all loved it. When advertising was used to that people care about the Amazon, we loved it. And when it's used to get people to smoke more cigarettes, then we hated it. And so it's not the vehicle that needs to be blamed, it's always the purpose that needs to be blamed. And so I think the question is not new. It's a question that we've always asked, what is the right thing to do? And for us, we always need to remember, what is the golden rule? The golden rule is don't harm, right? Do no harm. And once you have that, the question becomes almost irrelevant, in my view. Or at least not specific for gamification.
And the Octalysis Group really invests a lot to promote the framework. For instance, with the Octalysis Prime certificate and the book Actionable Gamification from Yu-Kai Chou, that by the way I read and I recommend. However, the use of the framework is copyright protected IP and can be used only for fair use on public domain. Otherwise, you need to pay the monthly license for the different packages such as gold, silver, bronze.
Yeah.
In consequence, I know people in startups which they know well the framework but cannot unfortunately afford to use it. What is your strategy regarding licenses? What is the limit of the free license, €3?
Okay, good question. So it depends a bit what kind of startups do people work. Because if you have a product that you want to develop using the Octalysis framework insights, there's no limit to it, right? If you want to build a new product like a car on the basis of Octalysis framework, you're free to do that. You're not free to say, hey, now I'm going to sell Octalysis to other people as a consultancy company, because that's where the IP comes in. And so that's why we have licenses. And licenses we have with companies mainly when we feel there's a complementarity. So if they're doing exactly the same in a region that we're present ourselves, what's the use? We do it better than them anyway. And it will cost us a lot of time. But sometimes in countries where we're not there, where we may not have access, Russia, for example, is a good example. We'd love to work with people that understand the methodology, that have some clout, because one person band, what's the use for that person? And for us, in terms of spending a lot of time training them. And we take it very seriously, because we don't make a hamburger and sell it 1,000,000 times. It's all about quality. And so the moment people start saying, hey, we do Octalysis, and it's really bad, then the whole brand gets affected. And so we're really, really picky with who can say we are this, because it's not as easy or straightforward as becoming an accountant, just applying a lot of rules constantly, ticking boxes. And so that's why we have bundled it into a licensing program. Now the difference between the free, I'm reading your questions so I can answer them more effectively. So the difference between licensing and Free Hero is that licensing gives you the IP rights to carry to clients and to implement. And there's a monthly subscription packages where we help you, we train you, your whole staff, and we also give you business development support. Well, the free license, it's not the free license actually, it's just a expression of support basically. So an Octalysis hero is like, hey, I'm inspired by this, and in my in my thinking, I get guided by the Octalysis framework. And so that it doesn't give you any IP rights, but it could lead to clients saying, hey, we like this, that you have this, and maybe we want to work with you. And so sometimes people have this model where they get their free clients on the basis of this, then come to us, hey, do you want to work together to do a joint implementation? We do a revenue share, and then later, hey, can we say, hey, we liked it or we don't like it, and then go for licensing after that. Is that clear? Yeah.
Yeah, in general, how long are you working on project? I imagine it can depend a lot.
Yeah.
But which step is, in your point of view, the most important or the most difficult? Sorry.
Right. So how long is a piece of string? Because it depends on the project, right? If you build a bridge, it's obviously it takes a lot more time than if you build a doghouse. And so it's the same with us. So when we work with Microsoft for their programs, the Azure program, for example, we're working on a 3-year program. Things change gradually in that organization. Some organizations, it's quick. It's 2-3 months. It also depends whether we also do our design in development or only the design part. And so normally when we do what we call a full Octalysis design, from the first part that we start working with the company to the deliverable of all the screens, it's around 3 months, 2 to 3 months. Which step is the most important? Well, the cornerstone of gamification is that it connects, good gamification, that it connects to your business metrics. And so getting those right is for the client the most important part in the beginning, right? Because often we talk to clients who have a whole range of priorities and objectives. And so we have 20, and so we cannot design for 20. We can optimize for 2 or 3, and the rest we can still influence, but 2 or 3 is what we want to optimize our designs for. So in that sense, it's better to be 80% correct for 20% than 20% correct for 80%, to use a cliche. Yeah. And so for the client, I think that the first step is very important. For us, it's very important also to make sure that we get the development team involved at a very early stage. You don't want to have that you've designed something and then at the end the development team's like, well, very interesting, but we can't do this, right? And then you wasted 1.5 months. And so obviously what is very confrontational from a creative perspective is what we call the brainstorming part, where we go through all the 4 phases and brainstorm what features we can actually implement, because you're completely open. And there's a lot of times where we have creative block, the same fears that artists have or writers have, we have them as well. And sometimes it goes, and often we're like looking at a blank paper, and then of course you need to present it to the client, and it's a very confrontational moment where they either like it or they don't. And so the most difficult, maybe that's it. It's also where most of our big value lies, and to make sure that we transfer the design slowly from extrinsic to intrinsic is also very crucial. Then of course, designing as such means you need to have a lot of strong UI and UX skills, making sure that you know how to work with Sketch or Figma or those tools. And so as you can see, the whole process goes from business consulting, McKinsey style business processing, to very creative part to what we call the battle plan, where all the in-game economy infrastructure comes on, which is more economics almost, and then back to very creative, but then also UI UX, more visual. And so there's a lot of parts that are very difficult for some people and easier for others.
Yeah, now I have 3 questions that I ask to everyone. They are quite fast answer. What's your favorite example of gamification?
Well, I'll give you 2 examples. One that is ours and one that is from the market. I still think one of my favorite and very simple example of gamification is Pain Squad, what I also mentioned in my presentation, because it solves such a pregnant problem, right? Measuring pain, registering pain in very vulnerable population like children. And those are often the victims of our big machines or angry or scary doctors. And so how can you make sure this becomes fun? How can the most horrible pain and the most horrible experience becomes fun? If you solve that, or at least engaging. If you solve that, then you're reaching not only the goals of gamification, making sure that real life becomes fun and engaging, but also are tackling what we want to do, be a positive force in the world. And so that's one of an example that I really like. Now, one of our examples is what I really liked, first of all because I worked on it myself, which is the new Volkswagen Group Reward and Loyalty program. I like it a lot because we were really had the opportunity to change the culture. And the Volkswagen Group is not a very, very modernizing culture as a nature, right? So or by nature. And so to be able to change that, to get people to buy into a concept that is really revolutionary, even for gamification, never been done. For us is amazing. And we're just starting with this program. And if it survives the political turmoil that Volkswagen Group goes to once in a while, because you never know, if it survives and it can be really rolled out in the world, there's so much design there that I still want to implement that we couldn't put in a first release. But yeah, it's cool. It looks cool, and I think it's cool that we did that with a company that you don't expect it from.
What game comes into your mind when you think about your childhood?
When I think about my childhood, in terms of games, I mean, I played a ton of Donkey Kong. I mean, a lot of Donkey Kong. I could play the Donkey Kong blindly, and just on the basis of hearing the sounds, I could know when to jump. So that I played a lot. And of course I played a lot of real games as well, football and basketball and all these things. But in terms of games like this, probably Donkey Kong and Risk as a board game. Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt about it. I play way too much Heroes of the Storm. So Heroes of the Storm is a Blizzard game. And so it's a mobile game, just like League of Legends, so Dota 2. And it combines basically, it brings together in one experience all the heroes of Blizzard, from Overwatch, from World of Warcraft, for example, from StarCraft, Diablo. So all in one game. And so it's 5 against 5. Everybody has their core, and there's forts and keeps. And it's a little bit like League of Legends, but it's a little bit simpler. Maybe more in line with my intelligence, I don't know. But it's the action starts sooner, which I like because I think I'm an impatient person, and so I like to get fighting immediately. Yeah, it's I probably spend, I don't know, if I wouldn't have to work, I'll probably spend 2-3 hours a day at least on it. Yeah.
So that was the end. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.